Yeah, so we wanted to watch this video the previous day, but we didn't get around to it. It is, I've been told, a really good video. Defenses, how to stop dying in Diablo 4. Okay, I just hope he's not going to be like, Kripp doesn't understand how resistance works. Okay, because yeah, okay, that's true, but I understand that they're really, 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 really bad. Because that's the only thing I really care about. That's the only thing I looked at. I looked at how good they were, not how they work. Okay, so I'm gonna be disappointed if he goes there. I'm just saying. All right. He died, so that video has no credibility. True.
Hi everyone. As most of you might know, I play hardcore almost exclusively in Diablo 4. I have leveled one rogue to 100 already, and I'm on my way with my second rogue with a different build that is 86 by now. So I'm intending to reach 100 of that as well. And I also want to try to kill Uberlilith and push tier 100, etc. So far,
86, right? That's higher than Quinn, right? When this video? A day ago. Okay.
I have not lost a single character besides the halt incident, and I've also never procced the elixir of death evasion. It's when I used it, which was not really often, to be fair. So I think I can give some tips on how to survive with pretty much any character, any build, and give some general advice on how to build your character so that you have an easy time getting through the game. Because there are some things you can do majorly wrong and right. So I'm going to talk you through how I built my character here to be extremely tanky, to survive molten explosions, even multiple of them if I have to survive plague explosions, to just stand in the middle of a pack and basically not worry about anything.
The armor.
So number one is you need to have enough damage reduction. First of all, a lot of people that always think me they're build planners and all that, they completely neglected damage reduction on, for example, helm or chest, because these can be not just defensive slots, but also utility slots. And a lot of people tend to put whatever they can on it, but no defense. So number one, run defensive aspects that actually do something for your build. So you see here, I have a defensive, I have another defensive, and the pants are only defensive. You are forced to have defenses here. And optionally, you can even have a fourth one on your amulet. But this,
I'd like to point out the health of my character in the dungeon that has significant poison mechanics. I don't even know what's hitting me. Who cares?
This is usually not really needed. One defensive aspect in particular that works for all classes and for many builds, or at least can be tried to be included in many builds, is disobedience. Disobedience is by far the most powerful defensive aspect in the game.
Yeah, obviously.
It gives you up to 50% extra armor.
Armor's brilliant.
And the way that armor works is that, first of all, it reduces your physical damage taken, which is usually most of the damage you take. And it also applies this damage reduction value for half of the damage taken from all other elements. So armor in general is a very powerful stat, and you want to have it pretty high in general.
Yeah.
You see here right now I have 45% damage reduction when I have no disobedience stacks with my gear right now against enemies of the same level. You get a penalty for fighting high level monsters, you get a bonus for fighting low level monsters, which you usually don't do. So this armor reduction actually is not accurate if you're, for example, farming nightmare dungeons and monsters are above you. The exact calculation is currently unknown as far as I know, but it means that you generally take more damage than what it says here. Now the thing is that if you have disobedience stack, you can see my armor going up, and you see here the damage reduction goes to 82% against monsters of my level. So I go from 45% damage reduction to 82% damage reduction. Or in damage taken values, I go from 45% damage taken to 18% damage taken, which means I only take 40%, less than half of the damage previously for physical damage. And again, half of this damage reduction applies to elements.
Start slamming.
So this makes armor generally extremely powerful, especially if you have a way to stack disobedience. Now this is generally only doable for builds that hit very quickly a lot of targets, or have dots in their build.
Okay, now they're all focusing on the butcher.
Basically any respectable Sorc build will probably have some source of burn. Basically any respectable rogue build would have some source of poison, and any bard build has some kind of bleed. The druids have some poison stuff, and the necros generally want to play around Shadow Blight or something like that. So
he's wrong. We are just going to get copious amounts of armor. Damage reduction? Who gives a shit? Armor to the moon, baby. Stonks.
Basically every single class with most of their best builds actually do have some form of dots in their build to stack Disobedience very easily. That being said, I would absolutely not be surprised to see Disobedience nerfed very soon and maybe cap at half the amount of stacks. So instead of 100 stacks, make it 50 or something like that. So that's just not so obscene on the higher end, but a bit more consistent.
If they do that, goodbye barbs. See you in season 1, maybe. See ya, maybe. Okay, that's... If they nerf Disobedience or touch armor in any way, barbs are completely screwed. Okay. Every barb build that does any amount of damage that is more than depressing has close to no investment in defense. They're literally just using that aspect and the fact that they get like over 1,000 free armor from strength. That's it. That's carrying the hell out of the defensive side of barbs. Because if you can't get armor very high and you get everything else like crazy, which is what I did on my Sork, it works, but again, around 25 levels above you, doesn't work anymore. Everything one-shots you. Armor the only thing that actually gives you like that meaningful amount to prevent one-shots.
But for now, this is the #1 aspect to use. The thing about armor and resistances is that resistances are nearly entirely useless in Diablo 4.
Yes.
So this is not like Diablo 2 where you stack the resistances additively up to 75% damage reduction, and then this is kind of like the must-have for hell difficulty. In Diablo 4, they multiply, they don't add together. So basically the way that resistances work in Diablo 4 is that you have 20% resistances, which gives you 80% damage taken, so 0.8. And then you have another 20% resistances. They don't add up to 40% resistances, but instead they multiply. So 0.8 times 0.8. So you have 36% resistances. And if you add another 20%, it's not 60, it's going to be like 49%.
So what he's describing wouldn't even be that bad. But what he's describing is only how it works in the normal mode. Okay? Past the normal mode, there's these resistance penalties. And honestly, I don't even know how they work. I think some people figured it out, but I don't know how they work. But basically, I've seen it graphed. If you look at a graph, you basically cannot get your resists over 60. Okay, you just can't. Which means 30 elemental reduction is like just about the cap in the highest difficulty. 80% DR. No cap, scales linearly. This goes to 100. Okay, like this goes to 100. Let me find some mobs. Okay, here. 100%. Reduce physical damage taken from enemies of equal level. 100%. So apparently that caps out at 85 for physical, but I don't believe it's been tested for elemental. There's some chance it's 50 elemental. Yeah. I'm not even sure it's 85. It feels like you don't take damage at all. I'm just saying. It scales linearly. So the more you have, the better it is. If you have no armor and you get like 50 armor, it doesn't do anything. But if you have like 10,000 armor and you get 50 armor, it's insane.
So they multiply so that the remaining incoming damage gets reduced by that amount, by 20%. But a bigger issue with resistances on top of that is that there is a penalty applied to them. So when you go to the World Tier statue in Kyowa Shard, you can see that actually the difficulty overview tells you that in Torment difficulty, you get a 40% resistance penalty. So all of those values that you have in your items actually get reduced by 40% before they start adding any kind of damage reduction. So for example, a 20% resistance roll on your items gets reduced by 40%, so it's actually only 12% damage reduction. But then only half of the incoming non-physical damage is reduced by this resistance value. Because the other half...
Did you guys understand that? If you have no resists, so like the maximum effect of resists, like the pure maximum effect. Okay, if you have no resists, and you have a 20 resist all amulet, and you're on difficulty 4, which is obviously where you are. Okay, it immediately goes down to 12, and then half of that is applied to actually reduce elemental damage. So a 20 resist roll in the very best case of having no diminishing returns. The very best case reduces the elemental damage taken for the resist portion by 6. 20 goes to 6 in the literal best case possible. It's not even realistic. Everyone has some resist. Like the low level amulet has 26. So it's never that, right? Like the int gives me like 40, right? So it's never that good of a case, and it's still a joke. Like, that is a joke. Yeah.
Half is reduced by your armor. So let's say you take 1000 damage and have 80% damage reduction from armor, then 500 of that damage will be reduced by 80%. So I take 100 damage from the armor part, and then there's the other part, the other 500, that gets reduced by, let's say, 20% for my fire res. So I take 400 damage. So it combines 100 damage taken from the armor.
I really like his example, because his example is actually kind of how you'd get it. His example is like, if you take fire damage, your fire resist will basically do nothing, and the armor will actually reduce it by nearly half. If you want to reduce incoming fire damage, you're supposed to avoid fire resist and get armor. Seriously. Seriously.
Armor side and 400 damage taken from the fire side, and your overall damage reduction is 50%. But because of this resistance penalty that you get in torment difficulty, resistances are simply not very easy to stack and effectively useless. Like, you don't want to have resistance on your items really. You do get them by default on some of your pieces, like the amulet and the rings. So you kind of are forced to have a bit of resistances. But generally, in terms of the value that they provide to your character's defenses, is extremely low. You may find a chest piece, for example, that has like 3 different resistances with like 50% or something like that, and you think, wow, this is a lot of damage reduction. But again, you get a 40% penalty, so that 50% is actually 30%, and then you get half of that, so it's 15% damage reduction. And then that resistance only applies to a single element. And look at those other stats you can have on a chest. You can have 18% damage reduction from close enemies, up to 24% almost. And that applies to all elemental types. This applies to physical, to fire, cold, whatever. And the same with damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned. Damage reduction, like just the raw damage reduction. You can have life. You can have damage reduction while fortified on other classes. So these are actually the stats that are a ton more useful than resistance could ever be. So resistances can be useful under very specific circumstances if you want to optimize your character for one specific activity or for one specific boss fight or something like that. But right now we don't have anything like that in the game. But
so I think even that is super extreme. Like, if you are at the armor cap, and the armor cap is 85 or whatever, and not like 100. But I don't know if it's capped for resists. I don't know if it's capped for resists. The armor cap might not apply. Like, it might be 50 to apply for, because you can't get resist to 100. You can't get resist to cover the rest of the 50, right? It wouldn't be unreasonable for the elemental mitigation to be the full 50 on armor. But unless you are at that maximum for the boss encounter, it is without any doubt that it's better to use an armor elixir. An armor elixir gives you, I believe it's either 700 or 900 flat armor, which is a massive amount. And a resist potion gives you 20%. 20%. Okay, that's before it gets nuked like crazy.
Let's say, for example, Ashava becomes an uber boss, and Ashava does almost entirely physical and poison damage and no other elements. In that case, it might be worth stacking poison resistance on your items. but this is like the only extreme scenario where that would make any kind of sense.
Yeah.
And what this also means is that diamonds in a jewelry are absolutely worthless. You always want to have skull on basically every single build. You want to have skulls, even on builds where you run disobedience and you're kind of overcapping very easily with your armor. The armor caps out at 85% damage reduction.
More armor.
So right now my armor values are relatively low because of a bunch of like not very high item power pieces, and the item power dictates how much base armor each of those pieces has. So for example, here I have 668. If this was like 800 boots, I would have like another 50, 60 armor. Same here and same here, etc. So my items are a bit low, but even so, with a stacked disobedience, I can reach near 85% damage reduction against monsters of my level. If I had a bit better rolls or maybe a few extra armor nodes on Paragon, I could easily reach the armor cap. On the tooltip, it can go over 85%, that's a bug. So don't be fooled by that, you can't get 100% damage reduction. 85% of armor is the cap. But back to the item rolls, a chest.
Someone said that they tested this, but I'd be curious to see the tests. It feels like it's more. The monster damage reduction cap, like monsters can get like crazy resist your damage because it stacks additively on the monster. The monster damage reduction cap is like 99. Monsters can't be immune to your damage, no matter what. Unless you're like out of range of the bubble thingy. Like if they have the bubble thingy. Right. But same level, I kind of feel like it might go over 85. And also, even if the cap is 85, I'd be curious to see if that cap is then relayed to your resists. Because it could be 85 for physical, but it could be like half of the 100 that's displayed that goes to elemental. You might be able to get like 50% reduction from armor to all elements. And the reason that would be like a fair mechanic is because resists are so bad, you'll never get more than like 30. So even if you have 100% armor and maximum resists, which honestly probably only a necromancer might have a shot at, it's still only 80 mitigation to elemental. That's if it goes to 100 through armor. So even that is not unreasonable in my opinion. So I don't know how it works exactly, but I'd be curious to see some information on this, some tests.
Test piece like this is almost the best in slot of any kind of item I could wear. I have the raw damage reduction that applies to everything. This is very powerful. Then I have the close enemies, which is the most powerful one for a melee build, and I'm mostly in melee range. I have the poison reduction as well. So similarly, this could be like damage reduction from burning enemies, damage reduction for a while fortified. So on other classes, you might swap that around, but is
so damage reduction from close and distant are like separate stats. It's just almost all the really deadly stuff is in your face in Diablo 4. Like, even if you're playing a ranged character, you're really playing a melee character. Like I think Mr. Llama complained about the size of the screen. It's like too zoomed in. Like this is close. Like this, like where my golem is distant. Like that's distant. Close is like there. It's like close is a pretty small radius, but it's like it considers the edge of the hitbox. So really it's quite large.
Essentially I have the top 4 stats with pretty high rolls here on a stats piece. So this is like GG. And
but I want to see, where's the GG gear? Damage from close, yep. Flat DR, that's like 3% off, bro. Life, okay, it's not bad. Damage from distant. More damage reduction, more life. I have dodge against close, and I have perfect armor. That's GG. That's GG. Yeah.
Applies to the pants. You can actually roll exactly the same stuff. And you see here 23.7% damage reduction from close enemies. That stat alone is literally a legendary aspect. One stat. And again, I have the damage reduction for everything. I have the damage reduction from distance. I have some life. And there could be, again, like...
Blizzard's like taking notes. They're like, oh wait, that's true. Okay, let's just nerf all the damage reduction on gear to make it as worthless as resists. We log in tomorrow and that like 24 damage reduction from close enemies, 2.4 damage reduction from close enemies. Log out.
Like, for example, total armor is not terrible. So especially when you are not running Disobedience, you can run % total armor, or you can have all these other damage reduction stats. There are also damage stats on these pieces, especially in the chest. You can have like physical damage, cold damage, fire damage. Forget about all of that. It's all absolute worthless. It's all bait, because those damage stats...
Okay. I'm gonna have to say something here. It's not all bait. In some cases, the values are very high. And in some cases, the builds really don't have that much additive scaling. For example, damage to close enemies could go to 35 on this ring. 35 added damage, not for my character. My character will have quite a bit. But like the Ice Shards build, like for Sork, that build only has like 300 to 400 additive damage. It actually doesn't have that much, because there's no glyph that specifically increases either cold or core skills. There is none, right? So if it was like 35 to a skill categorized like that has like no glyph support, that could be like 10% more damage in one roll. And 10% more damage in one roll is certainly worth it. So he's right, because like 99% of the time that isn't the case. You have to be playing a build that specifically doesn't scale additively very well and mostly works off of like crit multiplier type of stuff scaling and bone damage. There are some builds like that really don't have any major glyphs that do additive damage. And in some of those cases, some of the stats, like I don't know if I have like something dumb like you see damage over time, it only goes to 21, right? 21, but the other one goes to 35. 35 for the right build can work. So just keep that in mind. It's not always bad. You have to give it a quick second to think about it sometimes.
Nearly do nothing for your damage, and they definitely don't help you to survive. While you can have literally like 2, 3, 4 like legendary aspects in just stats.
Okay, to his credit, he's talking about a chest piece. On a chest piece, it is always worthless, because the opportunity cost of defensive stats is enormous. Yeah, you can have like 50% more mitigation almost from one stat. So on a defensive piece, he's absolutely correct. In that case, it is 100%. There is no chance you would give up a defensive affix for like 20 cold damage or any stupid shit like that. No chance.
On your chest piece alone, and the same for the pants. And even on your amulet, you can stack some of these. You see here, I have another 23% damage reduction from close enemies. So your chest piece and your pants need to be on point if you want to survive. You're looking for exactly those stats. You're not looking for any kind of damage stats. You want to have defenses only, and life as well. Speaking about life rolls, there are 5 slots where you can roll life. So number 1 is the helm, then you have the chest, the pants, and your 2 rings. So these are the only slots that can roll maximum life, and maximum life is extremely powerful as well. So on your headpiece, there's usually no negotiation. There's not really any like crazy stats you can roll besides life and cooldown. So you always go for that here. And then
I don't think he knows, but helms can get armor, and armor is actually stronger than life. Yep, armor is the top armor roll is better than the top life roll on a level 100 character, unless you're armor capped, which at that level you probably are not. I guess I can't say 100% because we're assuming that we kind of understand the armor formula, which we don't. But yeah, in terms of the tooltip change, if you do the math on the reduction, my Sork, which isn't going off of that much base armor, like there's almost no armor nodes for Sork, it was getting 15 damage reduction to physical and 8 damage reduction to elemental from a 10 armor roll. Would I rather have that or 7% more life? No, I'd rather have that. So armor is actually, I would say, likely the strongest stat for a helmet. But if you have like no health on any of your gear, that does change, of course.
And on the chest piece or on the pants, you could argue under certain circumstances, if you have like, let's say, another like 15% damage reduction roll instead of this life, that would be okay. But generally, you want to stack life wherever possible, especially on the helm and especially on the rings, in my opinion. So rings are usually crit, life, plus 1 extra stat. Like.
Okay, yeah, he's also playing rogue. The ring is like heavily contested for like actual damage stats, so I guess this is more of a rogue mindset. From a rogue mindset, I get it. I get it. Like the life opportunity cost on helm is not that big a deal. It's a perfect roll. I'll keep that, I guess. But for rings, if you're playing crit and lucky hit shenanigans, yeah, there's just a lot of stats you want on ring otherwise.
Either vulnerable damage or resource generation. So these are usually like the typical rings if you want to have like a GG1. But yeah, on the helm, it's non-negotiable. And you see here right now, I have 9,500 life with my rogue. If I take off my maximum life gear, this will go down to like half that or so, 5.5k. So with just those 5 item rolls, and they're not even like fully maxed out here, I have 800, I have 800 again, I have 700, 600, and 1000. So this is a pretty solid roll, but all the others are not even anywhere near maxed. So I could have more than double my life by just having those 5 life rolls here. And another thing to know about life is that the percent maximum life rolls or rubies or stuff from paragons that gives you extra maximum life. For example, down here on the starting board, you always have this maximum life here. This actually does not multiply your life bonuses from your gear. So the flat extra bonuses are only flat bonuses. They don't get another bonus. What this means is that it makes rubies generally extremely weak, and you want to focus more on the damage reduction gems in your gear. So for example, any kind of fortify class runs sapphires, you get 3% damage reduction.
So the DR from fortify, they don't add up. It's not like, well, you have 5 gems, 15 damage reduction while fortified. No, each one is its own bonus. I mean, you know what? I'll tell you what it is. 0.963, 0.97, power 5. It is, okay, it's 14.1. It's not too bad, not too big of a difference. You lose a percent. You get shortchanged a little bit. You got to tip them. And the life rolls, I believe, are 4%. But base life on a high level character is really high. Like a Sork has like 10,000 health on level 100. Oh no, I guess I have some Paragon stuff. I don't know how the Paragon stuff works. It probably is additive to that. I guess I probably have like 8,000 or so. So 8,000. 20% of 8,000 is 1,600. So 1,600 is 10 EHP, and the other is a conditional 14 DR. 1 divided by 0.86. Oh, what syntax there? 0.86. 16 more life. Effective life. 10 versus 16. Honestly, that's pretty fair. Even if you have a lot of life from Paragon, like in the worst case, full rubies is 10% total EHP, and the fortify stuff is 16, but it's conditional on fortify. I'm just saying, those rubies aren't so bad. Like, I did some quick math on them. He's right that those are better, but I think people are way too optimistic about keeping fortify up, in some cases anyway.
Actually, about fortified up to 5 times, that's pretty sick. Or you run Topases, especially if you don't have a good source or a very reliable source of unstoppable in your build. Topases give you 10% damage reduction while control impaired. So you can stack 5 of these and they multiply with each other. You get roughly 40% damage reduction while crowd controlled. And there are a lot of crowd controls in the game, especially on hardcore. This is extremely useful to have because, well, being crowd controlled is the #1 source of deaths apart from disconnect. So rubies, especially with a bit of maximum life rolls on your gear, are an absolute bait. Forget about those. Sapphires are fine on fortified classes, and otherwise it's...
They're not bait. They're fine. Okay, they're fine. 10 EHP is fine.
Topaz all the way, basically. On every single build, I just slot Topazes because they're so powerful. And the thing about Topazes is they also work for soft crowd controls. So when you get slowed by flies, or you get chilled by some cold elite or something like that, you actually have this damage reduction applied to you, even if you're not stunned,
I think Topaz are a good choice.
Knocked down or something like that. So it can also make you a lot more tanky in regular combat. One thing to note here is the Temerity Pants. I keep getting a lot of questions about this item in particular. This can give you a barrier when you overheal over your maximum life. And people ask me, isn't that a good choice?
No.
And the answer is, hell no. You can maybe kind of use that for like the mid game, you know, if you find it level 60, you can use it to like maybe 80 or something like that. But the problem with these pants is they have atrocious stats. Effectively, none of the stats that you want on your pants that can give you, you know, more than double the effective HP. And all they do is give you this barrier. But you also lose a legendary aspect on top of that. So first of all, to even use the Temerity Pants, you need to have ridiculous healing in your build so that you constantly refresh this barrier to maximum. And then as you scale to higher levels, as you find better gear and you have more maximum life on your items and more maximum life % on your paragons, for example, this barrier does not actually increase. The barrier only scales with the base life. And at level 100, you're going to have, I don't know, something like 7k base life or so. You get 80% of that as a barrier, which is like 5k barrier or so. But a really min-max character with good life rolls, a bit of % life on your gear, you can have like 15,000 life or so. And only 1/3 of that will be barrier in the end. So Temerity is a kind of useful item for builds that run very little life bonuses and have a lot of healing and are far away from level 100. After you max out your character, you definitely don't want to use those pants anymore, unless they have a very good reason to do so. So if you follow all these points and you have similar items to me, you will probably survive a lot better already than you ever did. But then, of course, you can also specialize your character a little bit for some extra defenses. So especially with me playing on hardcore, I like to build my characters a bit tanky so I don't die. So for example, there are damage reduction passes on your skill tree. You can go for something like Sturdy on the Rogue, or Barbs have elite damage reduction or extra maximum life, or Druids have extra res or damage reduction after using the defensive skill. So these kind of passes can really help you out to give you like even more damage reduction. They're effectively similar to one of those item rolls. And you can also have sustain. So for example, on the Rogue, you have siphoning strikes. On the Druid, you can heal with nature skills. On the Barb, you can heal when you spend Fury. So it's not just about taking less damage, but it's also about healing. And some of those choices can be extremely powerful here. So something like Sturdy and siphoning strikes basically goes into every single Rogue build for me. And lastly, also don't want to neglect crowd controls. Crowd controls are very powerful in Diablo 4 because most fights are extremely fast-paced and short. So a crowd control that only lasts like 2-3 seconds will usually be enough to actually just disable a pack until they're dead. So you want to include some kind of crowd controls most of the time. As a rogue, this is very easy, but other classes also have the opportunity to do so. But just as an example, I run in, I throw down my poison trap, it gives me 1.6 seconds knockdown, and well, in those 1.6 seconds, I usually just kill everything. And anything that doesn't die will be poisoned, so I have less damage taken from the poisoned enemies. You can do stuff like debilitating toxins, they deal even less damage then. So you can always like swap around your setup a little bit to include maybe some more crowd controls, to include some of those defensive choices. And that also pretty much concludes the basics of how you want to build a character defensively so that you can survive, so that you can go to level 100 easily, so that you can survive maybe even higher nightmare dungeons. So focus on those defensive stats, especially on chest and pants. Focus on defensive aspects, especially disobedience, and have those topazes in your gear if you don't need to run another gem, for example, sapphires. And finally, forget about resistances, they are pretty much worthless. And then of course there's still a gameplay component, so you have to outplay certain enemies sometimes. You know, some attacks can crowd control you, really certain attacks do a lot of damage, for example the Goldman Shamans with the lightning, or the Molten Explosions. Like, you're obviously just not supposed to face tank these kind of things.
He's saying that you should be less bad.
So nothing can prevent you from dying there. But I hope this video helps you. Stay tuned for more uploads, and see you guys next time.
That's a good video. That's a good video. I don't have another one on my watch list. Let me unmute Diablo. The only thing that I really disagree with him is the rubies. I'm not saying they're the best ever, but like they're not bad. If you look at the stats on a piece of gear, you have like 10 DR, and then you have like 20 DR from close. If you use like that, like range, rubies are like 10 EHP even if you stack HP, and the fortified DR is like 16. I would say that rubies are very fair. And he said they're like very bait. They're definitely not bait, in my opinion. It might not be amazing, but I think they're very fair.